Hi, I'm Elise, 27, and my sister once broke 3 of my ribs with a crowbar while my parents watched. Guess what they told the cops? It was a misunderstanding. The last time I went home was for Rachel's engagement dinner, her second one, actually. I had only agreed to show up because my therapist said closure might look like showing up for yourself, not for them. Well, my therapist had never met my family. Their house still smelled like lemon polish and emotional manipulation. Rachel's new fiancé, Brent, greeted me like I was the waitress. "Oh, you're Elise? Could you grab me a Pellegrino?" I ignored him and walked straight into the lion's den, also known as the dining room, where Mom was micromanaging the catering staff like she was planning the royal wedding. "There she is," Mom said, with the same tight smile she used when someone brought cheap wine to dinner. "We weren't sure you'd show." "I almost didn't," I replied, setting down the gift bag I knew she'd ignore. Rachel turned from the mirror where she was fixing her lip gloss. "Still wearing those discount store shoes, huh?" And just like that, we were 13 and 15 again, and I was back in the role of the family punching bag. Dinner was a show. Brent talked about his real estate empire, and Dad laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. Meanwhile, I sat in silence, trying not to scream every time Rachel called me lazy, like she used to right before stealing my stuff or kicking me under the table. At one point, Mom leaned in and whispered, "Try not to make this about you, okay?" I almost left then. I should have. But I stayed through dessert because I hadn't seen my grandma's pearls in years and Rachel was wearing them like they were hers. After the guests left and the facade cracked, Rachel cornered me in the garage. I don't even remember what I said, something about the pearls belonging to me and Grandma's will. Next thing I knew, she had a crowbar in her hand. I didn't even see where she got it from. "You think you deserve anything from this family?" she hissed. Then it happened. A flash of motion. A crack. I remember falling, the air knocked out of me. The cold cement against my cheek. Dad's voice saying, "Rachel, that's enough." And Mom, who once slapped me for using her face cream, just stepped over me to move her car out of the garage. I blacked out. When I came to, I was in the back of an ambulance. A paramedic asked who did this to me. I whispered my sister's name. He said, "Funny, that's not what your parents said." And I knew then this time, I was pressing charges. The hospital was beige. That's what I remember most. Beige walls, beige sheets, beige linoleum floors that squeaked under every pair of nurses' shoes. I was hooked up to a monitor, 3 of my ribs fractured, one dangerously close to puncturing a lung. A concussion. Bruises like galaxies bloomed across my side. Detective Serena Miles came in on the second day. Tall, calm, matter of fact. The kind of woman who could silence a room with a single raised eyebrow. She pulled up a chair and said, "Your parents are telling us you fell down the stairs." I stared at her. "In the garage?" She smirked. "Yeah, that part confused me too." So I told her everything. Not just about the crowbar, but about 27 years of being treated like a backup plan they hoped would just go away. "My sister Rachel has always been their favorite," I said. "She got a car at 16. I got a job at Subway. She got therapy when her hamster died. I got grounded for crying at our grandmother's funeral." The detective didn't take notes. She didn't need to. I think she already knew the truth. "Do you want to press charges?" she asked. For the first time in my life, I didn't hesitate. "Yes." My parents lawyered up immediately. Rachel posted a statement on her Instagram saying I had a history of mental instability and was exaggerating a sibling squabble. It got 1,000 likes in the first hour. But Detective Miles found the security camera footage. Apparently, my parents' new security system had a camera facing the garage. And they forgot. I watched the video in the detective's office. Rachel lunging at me. Me going down. My father pulling open the car door while I was still writhing on the floor. No one called 911. Not even after I passed out. Miles looked at me after the footage ended. "They're going to jail for this, Elise." A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Not joy. Not relief. Just disbelief that finally someone believed me. The arraignment was held in a modest courthouse that smelled like mold and desperation. I sat in the front row, ribs still wrapped, my bruises just beginning to yellow. Rachel walked in like she was heading to brunch, perfect hair, tailored dress, that practiced smirk she always wore when she knew the adults were on her side. Behind her came my parents. Mom in her signature pastel blazer. Dad in a blazer 2 sizes too tight. He'd gained weight since retirement, probably from stress and the guilt he never admitted having. Rachel didn't look at me. Mom did, but not with concern, with annoyance, like I was embarrassing her. Their attorney argued for release on their own recognizance. "This is a family misunderstanding," he said, voice smooth as butter. A minor domestic dispute blown out of proportion by long-standing sibling tensions. My lawyer, Janet Ruiz, bless her no-nonsense soul, stood and said, "Your Honor, the victim was hospitalized with 3 broken ribs and a traumatic brain injury. She was struck with a crowbar while her parents watched. We have video." That got the room's attention. The judge raised one skeptical eyebrow. "Video?" Janet handed over the footage. It played without sound, but you didn't need audio to feel the violence. Rachel's face twisted with fury. Me crumpling. Dad stepping over me like I was trash on the floor. Rachel's bail was set at $250,000. My parents at $100,000 each. Rachel's fiancé Brent posted hers within hours. But the press had already picked up the story by then. Connecticut heiress charged in sister's assault caught on video. The article went viral. Everyone from BuzzFeed to Reddit had something to say. Some people called me brave. Others said I was trying to ruin a successful woman's career out of jealousy. Rachel lost 2 sponsorship deals before the weekend. Her employer placed her on indefinite leave. The first time I saw her again was at the pretrial hearing. She passed me in the hallway, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "I hope you enjoy the attention. It's the only thing you'll ever be good at." I didn't flinch. Not anymore. I just said, "Smile for the cameras, Ratch. They're all watching now." Because that was the day I decided I wasn't just going to press charges. I was going to take everything. The civil suit was my nuclear option. Criminal court would punish them, sure, but I wanted them exposed. Every passive-aggressive comment, every birthday they skipped, every vacation Rachel got while I was left behind with a microwavable dinner and the neighbor's Wi-Fi password, I wanted it all in the open. Janet helped me file for emotional damages, long-term psychological trauma, and financial restitution for decades of documented neglect. We asked for $1. $2 million. Their lawyer laughed when he saw the number. He wasn't laughing after we dropped the bombshell. My journals. I had 35 of them, going back to age 9. Neatly dated, emotionally raw, cataloging every time they forgot to pick me up from school, every time Rachel got a hug and I got a chore. But the real kill shot? The trust fund. Grandma Margie had left money for both of us, $100,000 each, to be released at age 21. I got a letter on my 21st birthday telling me the fund had depreciated. I believed them. Janet found the bank statements. Turns out the fund hadn't depreciated. Rachel had used both shares to put a down payment on a condo in Boston the year before. My parents signed off on the withdrawal. When confronted, Mom said, Rachel needed it more at the time. I stared at her across the deposition table. "You stole my inheritance to buy your favorite daughter a luxury apartment." She was starting her adult life, Mom sniffed. "You didn't seem ready." I should have felt rage. But what I felt was clarity. They had never planned on me having a future. After that, Rachel tried to settle. She offered $75,000 and a public apology drafted by her PR team. I laughed so hard I nearly reopened my stitches. "Sweetheart," I said, channeling her tone exactly. "You're going to pay for every minute I spent trying to convince myself I deserved your scraps." We won a trial. It was going to get ugly. And I was ready. The trial opened like a made-for-TV drama. Cameras outside. Reporters lined up like it was the Oscars. Inside, I sat between Janet and a trauma counselor the court assigned me. Across the aisle, Rachel wore white like she was the Virgin Mary and not the woman who once told me she hoped I'd choke on my own self-pity. Her lawyer's opening statement painted me as deeply troubled. He brought up my teenage therapy visits, my brief hospitalization for anxiety in college, even a high school poetry journal they had subpoenaed. "She has a long history of emotional instability," he said. "This is a family matter being twisted into a public vendetta." Then it was Janet's turn. She stood without notes, looked the jury dead in the eye, and said, "This case is not about teenage angst. It's about 27 years of emotional starvation, culminating in a physical assault so brutal, my client may never fully recover." The defendants didn't fail Elise by accident. They did it on purpose. We called witnesses. My elementary school teacher testified that I often came to class hungry. A neighbor remembered hearing me crying through the walls during Rachel's Sweet 16 party after I had been told I wasn't the kind of girl who needed a celebration. Even my old pediatrician took the stand and said she had filed 2 CPS reports that mysteriously went nowhere. But the moment that shifted everything, when Janet pulled out the journal I wrote the night Rachel got the BMW. "I hope one day I get a ride to college too," it said. "Not because I'm special, just because I exist." The courtroom went silent. The jury wasn't looking at me like a problem child anymore. They were looking at a neglected little girl who had spent her entire life being told she was less. And then Rachel took the stand. And that was a disaster. Rachel took the stand like she was walking a red carpet. She adjusted the mic like she'd done this before, which she probably had, given all her influencer live streams. Her lawyer had clearly coached her to look composed, empathetic, regretful. But Rachel could only fake humility for about 4.5 minutes. Elise always interpreted things in the worst way, she said sweetly. My parents treated us differently, sure, but that's because Elise was more sensitive. Sensitive? Janet asked, raising a single eyebrow. Is that your word for being assaulted with a crowbar? Rachel blinked, caught off guard. That wasn't how it happened. She lunged at me first. Janet paused. So you're saying Elise, with 3 fractured ribs and a concussion, lunged at you? Rachel stammered. I meant emotionally. She's always trying to ruin things. She resents me. She made everything dramatic. The jury was not buying it. Then Janet pulled up the security footage again. This time, paused frame by frame. Is that you, Miss Bennett, swinging the crowbar? Rachel stared at the screen, her face drained of color. I wasn't thinking. That much is clear. Then came the journal excerpts. Emails. Texts. Rachel once texted a friend during Thanksgiving. If Elise brings up therapy again, I'm going to lose it. Maybe she can cry into the mashed potatoes. The courtroom gasped. But the biggest blow came from an unexpected witness. Brent, her ex-fiancé. He had broken up with her 2 weeks after the assault and agreed to testify under subpoena. Rachel constantly mocked Elise behind her back, he said. She bragged about how their parents would never believe her. That even if Elise had proof, no one would care. He looked right at me when he said, she told me Elise was too pathetic to fight back. Rachel stood up mid-testimony and shouted, You cheating bastard. You said you had my back. The judge slammed his gavel so hard I thought it might crack the bench. Rachel was escorted out of the courtroom. By the time the jury was dismissed for deliberation, no one had any doubts left. Not even me. The jury was out for just under 3 hours. When they came back, the courtroom held its breath. Even Rachel looked like she might crack under the pressure, her once perfect posture now a tight coil of nerves. The forewoman stood. In the matter of Bennett versus Bennett et al., we find in favor of the plaintiff. She cleared her throat. We award Elise Bennett $2, $8 million in damages. It felt like the floor tilted beneath me. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stared straight ahead, hands clenched in my lap, as if letting go might make it disappear. Rachel's mouth dropped open. She muttered something under her breath I couldn't hear. Mom slumped back like someone had cut her strings. Dad whispered, Jesus Christ. But that wasn't the end. Because Janet stood up and addressed the court again. Your Honor, we are requesting execution of judgment to begin immediately, given the defendant's ongoing history of financial misconduct, including the misappropriation of Elise's trust fund. The judge nodded. Granted. Receivership and asset seizure will proceed. In that moment, I became the legal owner of their house, Rachel's condo, and half of what was left of my parents' retirement savings. But here's the real twist. That afternoon, I held a press conference on the courthouse steps. Cameras flashed. Microphones were shoved in my face. I had written my statement the night before, rewritten it 5 times, and practiced it in front of my bathroom mirror until my voice stopped shaking. I didn't sue my family for revenge, I said. I sued them because I survived them. I was raised to believe I didn't matter. That my pain was inconvenient. That being ignored was normal. That I didn't deserve the things my sister had because I was simply less. I paused, breathing deep. But I learned something in that hospital bed, bruised, broken, wired shut. I learned that I matter. And I will never, ever let them or anyone else convince me otherwise again. The clip aired nationwide. It was shared over 6 million times. I started getting emails, hundreds of them, from people who had grown up like me. Neglected, erased, invisible in their own homes. My story had become theirs. And just like that, I realized I wasn't just a survivor anymore. I was the beginning of a movement. 6 months later, I stood at the front of a conference hall in New Haven, holding a microphone with sweaty palms, staring at 300 people who had flown in from 17 different states for the very first Invisible No More Summit. We had name badges and lanyards. We had breakout sessions on trauma recovery and legal resources. We had donuts and coffee and a table full of printed journal entries that survivors had donated anonymously, each one a piece of their buried truth. And we had me, Elise Bennett. Not a cautionary tale. Not the girl with the bruised ribs or the lawsuit. A founder. A speaker. A force. I started with the story, of course. The garage. The crowbar. The silence. But I ended with the truth. I thought justice would feel like revenge. But it didn't. Justice felt like breathing for the first time in my life without apology. The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was loud. Raw. People stood. Some cried. I cried too. But I didn't hide it anymore. The money from the settlement helped fund the nonprofit. We offered legal aid, scholarships, transitional housing. I hired my own attorney, Janet, full-time. She'd never had an easier yes. We called it the Crowbar Fund because if you're going to reclaim your story, why not name it after the thing they tried to kill you with? Rachel, last I heard, moved to Indiana and changed her last name. Couldn't get hired in PR again. Her LinkedIn now lists her as a freelance branding consultant, which I assume means unemployed. My parents never recovered financially. They now live in a subsidized apartment outside Hartford. Word is, Mom volunteers at a church thrift store and doesn't tell anyone her real last name. I don't think about them often, not out of forgiveness, but because they no longer matter. But I do think of the people I help, like Sierra, who lived in a storage unit for 2 months after her parents kicked her out for being a burden. Or Marcus, whose older brother beat him for years while their dad looked away. Or Jules, who showed up at our door with nothing but a garbage bag full of clothes and a journal that read, "If I disappear, it wasn't an accident." I gave them rooms, and therapists, and attorneys, and time, and I gave them my number. Because no one should have to go through what I did alone. My name is Elise Bennett, and I was erased, until I rewrote the story myself. They asked me to testify in front of Congress. I got the email on a Tuesday morning while reviewing housing grant applications. Subject line: Invitation to speak on family violence reform. I thought it was spam. Then I saw the Cinder Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. Apparently, someone on the committee had watched my invisible No More keynote. Then they read the court transcripts. Then they read the press articles. And then they asked, would she be willing to speak as an expert witness for the proposed Family Protection Equity Act? I said yes. It was surreal. I wore a navy blazer I'd bought on sale and sat next to law professors and child psychologists with decades of credentials. The chamber was cold and high-ceilinged, painted the same sterile beige as my hospital room had been. I told them about the crowbar. I told them about the trust fund. I told them about sitting on the floor of my childhood garage, bleeding, while my mother reversed the car and my sister laughed. But more than that, I told them about the before, the years of silence, the we'll see, and the missing birthday candles, and the way I was taught to shrink myself so thoroughly. It took broken ribs to wake me up. My family didn't just hurt me physically, I said. They raised me to believe that hurt was love, that being ignored was normal, that my sister's success required my invisibility. The room was silent when I finished. And then came the questions. One senator asked, Ms. Bennett, what would justice have looked like to you at age 10? I didn't hesitate. Someone who saw me, I said. And someone who said, you deserve more than this. The act passed 3 months later. It expanded funding for legal aid to survivors of familial abuse. It created emergency housing programs for estranged young adults. It mandated training for family court judges on covert abuse dynamics. They named a clause after me, the Elise provision. I didn't cry until the ceremony, not during the speeches or even the bill signing. But afterward, when a girl maybe 19, 20 approached me with tears in her eyes and said, I didn't know I was allowed to leave my family until I read about you. She hugged me, and suddenly, I was hugging me the girl I used to be. The one who sat alone at birthday parties, wondering if maybe she just wasn't lovable. But she was. She just needed a future version of herself to reach back and prove it. So I did. And now, I reach back for others too.